I'd like to tell you about this study I found on penguins and people, sort of. It's easily available on the internet through this title here, and it's a great example of learning something from a study in an area maybe you're not completely familiar with. As we go through this study together, we'll see the use of a categorical independent variable and a continuous dependent variable. We'll see some results that are statistically significant and some that are not statistically significant but interesting. We'll see how to learn some of these terms that are obvious to psychologists, such as scope of attention and thought action repertoire, but not necessarily to us. And on top of that, we might learn something about resilience, which we can actually apply to our own lives. Here's the article, easily available on the internet, and right here in the first line is the hypothesis. Then down here they go on to discuss the hypothesis more. Another word for the hypothesis is the broaden and build theory. To be honest, I had to read this a couple times to figure out a way to explain their theory in layman's language, but I figured it out. Have you ever known somebody, or maybe you yourself, who gets hangry? They get so hungry that they get angry. Then when they get angry, they can't even figure out what they want to eat, and you keep suggesting things and they just have no options in their head whatsoever because they're so hangry. That's what this study is about, but it's going the opposite direction. So psychologists have seen that when you have a negative emotion, all of a sudden the options you can think of narrow down. And so they were trying to look at the opposite side, these researchers, thinking about if you have positive emotions, will that open up the options for your situation that you can think of, or for even just what you want to do with your day? If you have a positive emotion, will that open up or broaden the options that you can think of? So that's the broaden part of the broaden and build hypothesis. And the build part is the idea of a spiraling positive effect. You have a positive emotion, you think of various options. One of those options is going to work well, you get a positive result. And then you have a positive emotion again. And then you experience another situation, you have many options, you pick a good one, you get a positive result again. And this builds your confidence and builds your repertoire of possible actions. You say, oh, that worked, oh, that worked, oh, that worked. And so there's a building, and that builds your resilience. Here is the method section of the article. How did these researchers look into this broaden and build hypothesis? First, we see that there were 104 university students that participated, and each participant actually did 2 experiments, one after the other, randomly who got which experiment first. To elicit emotion in the participants, the researchers used videos, 1 to 2 minute videos. The penguins video was penguins waddling, swimming, and jumping. That was to elicit amusement. The nature video similarly elicited contentment. The witness video shows a group of young men taunting and insulting a group of Amish passersby in the street, and primarily elicits anger and disgust. Cliffhanger, a prolonged mountain climbing accident, elicits anxiety. And finally, the neutral one was sticks, an abstract dynamic display of colored sticks piling up, and elicits virtually no emotion. So that is your x-axis. That is your independent variable. The independent variable along the x-axis will simply be the movie that each participant watched, either the penguins, the nature, the sticks, the bullying, or the climbing accident. The research will then measure how each particular movie affected the participants' scope of attention or thought action repertoire, and they'll graph that along the y-axis. So here's how you might set up the results after you've done the experiment. The people that watch the amusement video, how wide a scope of attention did they have versus the people who watch the contentment video or the anger video. So there's 2 possible y-axis dependent variables because there's 2 experiments. The scope of attention experiment looks at how the participant views a situation. Do they view it globally or do they view it locally? Do they see the forest or do they miss the forest because they're looking at the trees? And this is the test they used to measure that ability to see the forest, in other words. This test, you'll see, is surprisingly specific, but other studies have validated that it actually does test one's global versus local bias, or one's global versus local way of looking at things. So the participant is shown a triad like this, and they're asked which of the two bottom figures, this one or this one, is most like the top figure. If you answer this one, you have a more global view of things, because if you see it's 3 in a triangle, 3 in a triangle. But if you answer this one, you have a more local view of things, more specifics. They're all squares, they're all squares. So experiment 1 was run like this. Participant goes in, randomly assigned a video clip, watches the video clip, takes the global local test, and then takes a quick test on emotional response to the movie. They just want to verify with that third piece of the experiment that the movie was actually eliciting the emotions that they expected: amusement, contentment, neutral, anger, or anxiety. And that would be in the first experiment. They called it the breadth of attention experiment. The second experiment was the breadth of momentary thought action repertoires. So for this second test, the participants were shown a movie and then asked right after the video clip, what emotion did you experience the most during that movie? They wrote it down. Then they turned the page and were given this test. Take a moment to imagine being a situation yourself in which this particular emotion would arise, the one you wrote on the previous page. Concentrate on all the emotion you would feel and live it as vividly and as deeply as possible. Given this feeling, please list all the things you would like to do right now. For example, what if I had been given the Penguin video and it made me laugh, made me feel humor or amusement? So then I have 5 minutes to list 20 things I would do. I put myself in a situation where I feel amusement. One situation that comes to mind is when my kids were small and they did funny things like putting on their boots. And so I put myself into that situation. I'm being a young mom again. I'm remembering these boots just falling over and everything. And what would I do? What do I feel like doing when I feel that feeling? Well, I feel like laughing. I feel like hugging someone. I feel like maybe picking flowers or painting or being creative. When I feel that, when I think of my children trying to put on their boots in such a funny way, maybe I feel like giving money to an organization. Maybe I feel like going out to wash my car. I have these positive emotions, so I have 5 minutes to write down 20 things I'd like to do because I'm feeling that emotion. And I don't have to write 20, but I can write up to 20. So here are the results in the experiment, the results for experiment 1. And although researchers will often list the results as a table, in fact, usually, and then give a graph, these researchers just listed the numbers in a paragraph and made a bar graph. So I had to go into the paragraph to see which of the results were statistically significant. Statistical significance in experiments is often measured by the p-value. If you get a p-value in your experiment less than 0.05 or less than 0.01, then you can say the difference is statistically significant, the difference between two conditions, for example. Very often, p less than 0.05 is used. So you can see here that testing the positive film separately, a significant effect emerged for the amusing Penguins film of p equal to 0.045, which is less than 0.05. And almost, they called it a marginal effect for the nature film. They got a p equal to 0.064, so not really less than 0.05. You can't really say it's statistically significant, but you can say that the Penguins film caused a statistically significant effect. I changed this data that they gave us into a vertical bar graph so that we'll have the independent variable along the y-axis. And here's the bar graph that I created based on their data. You can see that if you watch the neutral video, the STIX video, you ended up with a global bias score of 4. In other words, your ability to see the forest and not get caught in the trees, you got a score of 4 on that. If you watch the Penguins video, you got a score of about 5.5, and that is a significant difference, statistically significant difference from the neutral video. The other videos did not create a statistically significant difference. You can see STIX versus bullying didn't really change your global bias versus cliffhanger, and even Nature didn't quite make it to a statistically significant difference, although when they combined the amusement and contentment videos, there was also a statistically significant difference in comparison to the neutral video. Similarly with experiment 2, you can see if the participants watched the neutral sticks video, after the video they were able to generate 11 action urges because of the emotion they felt after the sticks video. But after the penguins video, they were able to generate about 14 action ideas, and the bullying about 7 action ideas on average. So it turns out that there is a statistically significant difference between having a neutral video to watch versus having an amusing video to watch, and that having that amused emotion helps you to generate thought actions. It looks like the difference between sticks, the neutral video, and bullying, the anger video, also generated a significant difference. Not quite, it almost got it. It got to the significance, the p-value calculated was p equals 0.052. So not quite under 0.05. And the researchers did another comparison, comparing the 2 positive videos versus the 2 negative videos, and the difference then between number of action urges listed was very statistically significant, with p less than 0.001. So what does this all mean? Well, remember the original hypothesis was that positive emotions will broaden the scope of attention and thought action repertoires, that this was part of a broaden and build theory. So this study has supported the idea that positive emotions do broaden, make more global the way you look at something, and also increase the number of thought actions you can come up with. And that idea of broadening was part of a larger theory called broaden and build. So this is a direct quote from the article. Indeed, Fredrickson and Joyner found that positive emotions and broadened thinking influence one another reciprocally, over time producing an upward spiral in which people become better able to cope and experience appreciable increases in their well-being. So that is what the theory that they're looking for, and this study definitely supported the broadened thinking. The build may take some more study, and as the researchers say, studies are still needed to test the build hypothesis. This more far-reaching hypothesis states that to the extent that positive emotions broaden people's momentary thought-action repertoires, they promote the discovery and development of people's strengths and resources, which serve as enduring reserves that can be accessed in times of need. It's a very exciting theory. And this study was done in 2005, so it'd be very interesting to find out what has been done in research in this area since then, if they've been able to actually find experimental support for the build side of the broaden and build hypothesis. In the meantime, it doesn't hurt to do a little self-experiment. If you're faced with a problem, or either a math problem or a life problem, try watching some silly videos that amuse you before you list out your options of how to solve the problem. Who knows, it might help. Well, that's it for this video. Go ahead out and find some stuff to laugh about. Who knows, it may build your resilience as you face life's challenges. Bye-bye.